So this ended up happening. Had a pretty horrible accident with the Inspire. Ended up f***ing it up pretty bad. Yeah, so unfortunately I don't have footage of the actual crash, which I really can't stand. I've always said I wouldn't mind crashing a drone and destroying it as long as there's footage of it. Don't have it of this one. I do have that video of the fire, which was a huge surprise. Really quickly, if you're just tuning in, you may not know this is actually not my drone. This is a friend of mine's. I'm working together with him on this stuff, and he was actually very understanding. That wasn't a fun phone call to make, but he was actually very understanding of it. He wasn't with me at the time, but I was actually flying this for the very first time with a friend of mine using the dual remote control setup, which of course allows you to fly the Inspire plus having someone man the camera. And as many people have commented on the Inspire, it's a really kind of difficult thing to do. It's not as easy as it seems, partially because you only have the one camera. Basically, we were out at this kind of abandoned area, and actually there was like this abandoned tower that we were at. And this is always super important too if you're ever testing something out for the first time, if you're testing out new props, if you're testing out new gain settings, or you're just, trying some new moves or something like that. You should always be somewhere where, there aren't cars that it can drop on, or a street that it can suddenly block or something like that, or people around. So that's one thing we did do right here. We were kind of at this abandoned place. We took it up in the air and we were testing out the dual remote control version. And like I said, it's super hard. Once someone moves the camera out of the front of the craft as the pilot, and that was me at the time, as the pilot of the Inspire, it becomes very hard to control and have it go very specifically where you want it to go. Mainly following paths is really difficult. So we were kind of up in the air and we were kind of messing with that, trying to figure that out. And eventually we got a little bit better at it, and we decided to try to do a few 360 shots around this tower. And this tower is about 40 feet up in the air. And it actually has kind of like a sub roof too. So it's actually, what ended up happening is I think it hit it and then dropped down to the sub roof, which is about 20 feet below, and then bounced off of that and went onto the ground, which is another 20 feet. Yeah, basically we're going around this tower, and like if I'm me and this is the tower, we were going around and the gimbal caught, so it couldn't do 360 anymore, and the tower left the frame. And we're going super wide around it, by the way. We're not like very close to it. So that's not the biggest deal in the world. I think we both still think everything's under control. And then all of a sudden we hear a crash. So what must have happened apparently is we just suddenly turned right into it, or I should say I did, which is hard for me to believe. Honestly, we were just completely, both of us completely stunned. I was actually looking up at the time because it was in that blind spot, and I was trying to see where it was coming around. And yeah, all of a sudden I hear a bang, and I look down at my controller and I see the frozen frame of it falling, or on it, of what seems like it's falling. The person I was flying with, my friends, said they saw what looked like a tumble for a half a second. Yeah, we just heard a few bangs, and then we realized it had crashed. Obviously that's pretty devastating. This is something, unlike the Phantom 1, which I've had and crashed many times, this was something that we knew, was not going to be crashed at all. That we wanted to keep it in tip-top shape. We didn't want to mess with replacing parts or anything. We just wanted to have, this was the no-crash drone. And unfortunately, it did not work out. But yeah, we're kind of confused how it happened. You see also videos of like flyaways with these things, and like I remember seeing one video of like it taking off and just flying directly into a garage door or something like that. I've actually had a couple incidents with this too, where I've taken off, and then after it got a few feet off the ground, it just started going crazy because the compass hadn't been calibrated apparently properly, or was having issues. But I've had a couple of those happen. I honestly don't know what happened. It seemed incredibly hard for me to believe. I went from making an arc around it to suddenly flying into it. It just doesn't quite make sense to me. It may be my fault. I can't prove otherwise. Like I said, this whole thing was just a very big surprise to us that happened. But going back to the actual incident, we basically are gonna go get it now. It crashed. We don't see it. There's actually this fence around the place, and it's one of those fences with like slats so you can't see through it. But we kind of walk around to try to find an opening or an easiest place to cross over or go over it. We eventually went under it. yeah, this whole time we're thinking, you know, I hope it's not completely totaled. This is probably seriously damaged. We're probably going to have it out of commission for some time and replace a lot of parts, or at the very least, hopefully there's some salvageable parts from it. Eventually, once we finally got under that fence, and this is about 1.5 to 2 minutes after the crash, we just spotted it on fire in the middle of the ground. So that was, again, a very, very big surprise. Like I said, I've crashed my Phantom a number of times. I learned very early on that it was a very durable thing. And again, I'm not reckless with it. I don't go around people and just fly and maybe crash. The times I've crashed, I've been in areas where it was okay to experiment and try to get closer to things than I normally would if it was a delicate, valuable thing versus like something big that I'm not going to hurt, or trees and stuff like that going through branches and things like that. Yeah, I've crashed a bunch of times, never had ever an issue with the battery or anything, with the exception of the times I can't get to the battery in time or the drone in time and it has to sit there for a number of hours and the battery drains. Never a punctured or damaged battery. Obviously the Inspire is much, much, much different because it was immediately on fire, and as you can see, it's the battery that had the issue here. You can see right here, these are all the cells just kind of spread out here. You know, here's actually one of the circuit boards from the intelligent battery that would go right here. Here's the top, which was pretty close to it. You know, all the circuitry that controls the battery there. This is some of the outside wrapper, the warning sign right there, along with a bunch of other parts. This is here's the back metal part that says Inspire on it, that back metal plate. And yeah, no, the whole thing was just completely on fire. And we had to kind of, first we tried to, after we filmed it for a couple of seconds, we tried to put it out, and we ended up finding some sand nearby and dumping the sand on it and smothering it. You can see here by what looks like the plastic on the carbon fiber. Here, just some sand kind of melted to it and stuck to it and just throughout this whole thing. So basically, I ended up, of course, going home and having to call Cliff and let him know what happened. And then we ended up contacting, or actually no, the first thing I did after that, or actually probably before I called Cliff, was I looked online to see what, how, if this has happened to anybody else, because it seemed to me like it must have, because like I said, this wasn't that high of a fall. I wanted to just see what happened when other people's Inspires crashed. And surprisingly, when I searched Inspire crash fire, I didn't find really anything. All I found was the guy on a plane who brought some Inspire batteries on the plane, and the batteries ended up exploding, which doesn't really count. It's not the same thing. But we ended up going to DJI because, well, a couple reasons. One was I wanted to ask about the fire. I kind of explained exactly how it happened. I didn't really try to hide anything. Like I said, this is, I don't know exactly what happened, but I can't say it wasn't me. I don't know what happened. It just was a sudden crash. It was probably an accident that was my fault. But my big question for them was, what's going on with these in the batteries? How high can they fall from and be okay? Are they, because looking at the design too, the battery just hangs right off the back, and there's no crumple zone or anything. It's just some hard, thin plastic and metal that kind of cages it in. And again, it's exposed right off the back, right exactly where it will impact. My question was, should it have survived? Should it have lit on fire on the crash? Is that normal for these things? How high can they fall safely from, etc.? And then the other question I had too was, what do I do now? Because I have two controllers. We got the dual controller kit. Again, they don't sell the Inspire just by itself too. Is there any way we can buy just an Inspire body? And so DJI replied, and at first they ignored all my questions related to the fire or anything like that. They only said, no, you can't buy the Inspire by itself, but you can buy a one controller kit and we can give you a 30% off discount. So that was a bit disappointing, again, mainly because also the controllers are pretty expensive, and again, we also have a case and all the accessories that will, all the batteries. We don't have enough batteries and all that. So it just seems kind of wasteful to not just buy just the drone. But also just ignoring all my questions about the fire was a bit annoying. So I replied again and asked them once again, can you please address some of these questions? What they ended up saying was that to figure out the cause of the fire, they would need to receive it and look over it, but it's too badly burnt to do that. So again, sort of dodging my questions. I don't know, I guess, I don't think I'm the only person that's crashed an Inspire. I think a lot of people crash an Inspire. And a lot of people have had flyaways too, and so I wonder what happened to those flyaways. Yeah, so no real answers there. Again, like a little bit disappointed. It seems like kind of a little bit of a flaw and a little bit of an unsafe flaw to me to not have the batteries protected a little bit more on these things. But basically we ended up getting the replacement Inspire for 30% off, and that's on its way now. But just to go over the crash a little bit more, like yeah, you can see this whole section, this back section right here, is just all the batteries. Of course, you can see some random little pieces. Like here's one of the heat sinks that you can see underneath the propellers here. Yeah, you can see obviously these two arms broke right here, and you can see how badly that looks like all the melted propeller stuff. All the propellers were on, none of the propellers fell off. It looks like it impacted probably on the front at one point and broke both of these arms. This one is like completely fused into it, and actually the motor, which is right here, was also just fused into there, and it just kind of came off when I was setting it on the table a few minutes ago. A big surprise too is the motors. This one's loosened up now, but it had a pretty bad grinding sound a minute ago, and this one is like, you can hear it there, is almost completely seized up. So super disappointing that absolutely nothing on it is salvageable. Here, if I actually unscrewed these screws earlier so I could remove this bit. Here's where the GPS controller would be, and you can see this fan even got broken too somehow. I don't know how that happened, but fan got broken there. This big piece, I think, is the motor that controls the arms going up and down. And then the camera and gimbal obviously just got completely ripped apart and was found quite a few yards away. Here's the camera. ND filter is smashed, and you can see all the gimbal stuff. Like here's the ribbon that would wrap around that to communicate with the camera. The gimbal itself is pretty, again, I loosened it a bit, but it was very much just like completely seized up before. Here we even have a spring too from actually the landing gear. I didn't know that when I got it, but this landing gear actually has a little bit of a suspension to it, which is pretty cool. And those got messed up too. But yeah, a very disappointing kind of thing to have happen, a very expensive mistake. Again, Cliff was really cool about it and reassuring about it, and like one thing he said actually that really helped was in terms of camera gear, this is not that expensive. Again, he works with like a lot of Reds and stuff like that. But for me, yeah, if this was mine and I had paid for it, I would be completely devastated and probably not getting another one. And the main reason, by the way, we are getting another one, and this will be coming up next, I have a bunch of footage shot from this one. It really is pretty amazing. It shoots really amazing footage. Mainly the gimbal, I think, coupled with those manual camera settings and the light bridge is what makes this shoot really rock solid aerial video. I'm sure there are other options, and again, this one does have a couple of issues, and I'll be talking about those too. But, you know, again, for around $3,000, completely ready to fly and everything like that, it actually is pretty damn amazing. One of the very first things we're gonna do to the new one, by the way, is install an FPV camera on it, because again, the single camera with a dual operator is just kind of dumb. Basically, if you've, I don't know, if you go to DSLRpros.com, you'll see that they sell the Inspire, that company sells the Inspire with a extra camera on the front. It goes right here. And that camera is just for the pilot, and they also have to install an extra FPV transmitter. And so you can buy it from them pre-done, and I think you can also send in your Inspire and have them do it to yours. So I've already ordered some parts, and I'm gonna do it myself to the new Inspire, because like I said, in theory, it's going to be great. Like that's ideal to have two people, you know, one person on the camera, one person flying, but unless you're flying literally a couple of feet in front of yourself, you need, you know, the depth perception shooting far away doesn't really work too well. You need a camera for the pilot. And again, to follow, you know, you can go down straight and just have the camera start looking around, but really what you're gonna wanna do is start turning at certain points and turning around things and following courses while your cameraman does his thing. And without a second camera, that's not really possible. I also kind of wanted to figure out a way to protect the battery a little bit more. You know, they have this kind of white plastic body around the whole thing, and then again, the battery is just completely just hanging out the back. So hopefully, in addition to installing that FPV setup, I will create some sort of little bumper on the bottom, or again, just continue that plastic to make just a little tiny crumple zone on the bottom. I'm not saying that if it had that, it would have survived this crash, but there's certainly going to be some crashes that it will survive because it has a little bit of a bumper. And actually that's a good place possibly for the FPV transmitter to be right in there as well. And again, I'd rather crush, you know, $150 FPV transmitter protecting the battery. So that's going to be one of the first things we do. And also, again, just kind of a wake-up call with safety with these things. Don't go too close to things. Don't risk crashes, because if it crashes again, it could not just be your destroyed Inspire. You can also destroy somebody else's stuff. I mean, like, you could have, you know, if it landed, if that roof was flat, it wasn't flat, luckily, that secondary roof, but if it had just crashed on that roof and started to catch on fire on the roof, you could be in some trouble. Actually, when we had to pull it, it was a very kind of intense fire, and when it cooled down, we came back a little bit later, we had to like crack it off the ground, and there was like a bunch of molten stuff stuck to the ground, you know, or it lands on a deck, or, you know, right next to a car or something like that, or like in a forest or something like that. It could be a very dangerous thing, and really crashing with this thing is absolutely not an option at all. And also, one other thing I did is I ordered a couple of tiny little fire extinguishers from Amazon. They're like little air can deals that I'm hoping to fit inside the case somehow. Not to put out the fire of the battery, that's one thing that you should know. There's really no way to really put it out well except to smother it with a bunch of sand. But the thing that happens is it's actually gas from the LiPo that sets other things on fire, and like all the other electronics or the carbon fiber or the plastic. And so a little fire extinguisher would help control kind of secondary fires. But definitely be careful with the bigger quadcopters, because they can do some damage. So that was Inspire 1 number 1. Pretty disappointing. And yeah, like I said, we did actually, not so much disappointing. I actually got a ton of great footage off of this thing. And that'll actually be coming up while I wait for the other Inspire to come in. I'll just show you a bunch of footage, and then I'll probably have like basically like a reel, and then like a commentary on the pros and cons of flying with it, because there's just as a single flyer, by the way. Again, I just had that one flight in dual operator mode. Just even as a single operator mode, this thing is just really, really great, and you can get some really great footage. So I have a lot to say about it. And that'll be coming up. And then we also actually have a new computer upgrade video hopefully coming up. I'm having some issues with all this 4K footage now, and from this thing, as well as just my other work, is just I needed to do a little bit of an upgrade on my computer, and that's going to be coming up next. So until then, thanks for watching. Oh, and make sure you're subscribed and all that, all you new people who came here just to watch the Inspire fire. There's other good stuff here too. So subscribed, and that'll be it. Thanks for watching.